Hello, Humane Marketers. Sarah Znekrocha here. Welcome to another episode of the Humane Marketing Podcast, a place to be for the generation of marketers who cares. This is the show where we talk about marketing your business in a way that feels good to you, is aligned with your values, and also resonates more with your conscious customers because it's not pushy, ethical, and also beautiful. So if you're a regular here, you know that I'm organizing the conversations around the 7 Ps of humane marketing. And if you're new here and this is your first time, welcome. I'm so excited you're here. You may want to download your one-page marketing plan with the 7 Ps of humane marketing in the form of a mandala at humane.marketing/one page, the number one and page. So again, humane.marketing/one page. And with that, with no further ado, let's dive into today's conversation. Hi, Renée. It's so good to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us on the Humane Marketing Podcast.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Humane marketing and becoming, all of these topics that you talk about in your work are very much in line with what we're talking about here, this idea of marketing from within. So really starting with ourselves. So how do you see these personal transformations on this individual level then translating into something that is bigger, that is part of the collective and maybe even the business part? Let's dive right in there.
Just a small question.
Yes.
Well, that's a profound question that I experienced to be, innately, it takes me into the terrain of psychology, which is, obviously my training and my background, which is the psyche. How do we process, information, our experiences in ways that can support our ability to act in new and different ways. So I guess I would just say that and I mentioned this in my TED Talk, where there's no way around it, that there's no way around the inner and the outer. And I remember giving the talk on stage and ad-libbing a little bit, which you're not supposed to, but I remember making this statement that said, basically, our inner world and our inner life is directly influencing how we are in the world and what we do. And then I made this comment, I'm sorry, but there's no way around it. And that is to say, we'd like to think that we can do a lot of work in the world, by focusing on our actions or, our tactics, our strategy. But in actuality, as you know, everything we do is an expression of our inner world and ourself, which is obviously influenced by, our social context, our geography, our demographic, our personal biography, our circumstances, our proclivities, our personality, our inherent kind of essence. All of that is coming together. And the work, the work in the world of, ushering in and supporting life affirming and life supportive systems for the planet, I see relying on our ability as human beings to level up, to become more conscious, to become more capable of coming from a place of intention and choice versus unconscious habits, defaults, fear, all of that. So my reframe that I encourage is that the circumstances that we're facing in our world is an opportunity it's an invitation, and in a lot of ways a requirement for us as human beings to evolve. And by that I mean really evolve into our like higher selves, our highest good, the higher part that humans are capable of. That's how I see it. So, unless we put attention and intention to our own wounds, our own trauma, our own stuff that each human being has, we all have it, those that has to be side by side with how you show up with a team as a leader, with your marketing strategy, because if there's, whatever is there will come through. So if I'm coming from a place that I've learned the hard way, if I am coming from a place of fear, of anxiety, of scarcity, even a beautifully designed campaign, somehow that will come through.
Right.
And so it's sort of on me to practice diligence around that.
Yeah, I love that. And you work a lot in the sustainability field, and that applies there, right? That you have to first do this inner work in order to then help the outer and help organizations, pay more attention to climate crisis, and et cetera. And it applies, like you just demonstrated, also in a business and marketing sense, because when I first looked at marketing, when I had my own little crisis and said, well, I can't do this anymore, there's just no integrity in this. I looked at how marketing is usually presented as something outwards, right? It's out there, and you just have to somehow fit into that mold in order to be that person that you're supposed to be in this marketing realm. And that I just realized, well, that is not working for me anymore. It has to be according to who I am and my worldview and my values. And so the kind of like the consciousness that needs to evolve is also needs to happen on the marketing side, especially because I think so much that we see out there is, people have gotten such a bad experience with marketing. Everything is lies. We can't trust a marketer. And so the people who are then kind of went to authentic marketing, we still realized, well, not everything that they say is authentic marketing was actually authentic because they hadn't done that inner work, right? So it really, I see these parallels between also what you talk about, this anxiety and scarcity. Well, yeah, if we come from this scarcity mindset that we feel like, well, there's not enough, I need to hustle to get these clients. Clients feel it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's where the inner work comes in. You can't just will yourself or say, okay, I'm going to not do that anymore. You have to really cultivate the conditions somehow to explore and be with what is happening for you, and ideally have support, some resourcing to do that. The only thing I would just say is, I don't think it's like we have to do the inner work first before we do work in the world. It's they are inseparable. And I get kind of tired of this, binary. Binaries in general are still very alive and active out there, right? Hope versus despair, inner versus outer. It's like, that's just not how reality is. And so when our stakes are high and we're under stress, that's precisely when we tend to go into binary thinking. And so it's just important to recognize that it's not the inner or the outer. It's not inner first, then outer, and again, this goes back to what we already know, whether you look at neuroscience or whether you look at trauma research or whether you look at contemplative practice, that there's a lot of healing that is available by the act of doing and engaging with some sort of practice, like writing something or doing something in the community or launching a business, right? That's literally grist for the mill for our learning and practice and development. So, me doing my work with clients, it's an opportunity to grow always. That is the work. That is the practice.
I feel like oftentimes the people who come to me, they had to go through the things that are not working for them in order to
Yeah.
figure out, well, this is not working for me anymore. And so now I'm ready for a different way.
Yeah,
I feel that's often the
exactly.
case, right?
That is the human experience, I think.
Right. Yeah,
The
there's
human
just no
experience is,
shortcuts.
yeah, it's like literally learning by what isn't working and
Right.
paying attention to this isn't feeling good.
Yeah.
This isn't working for me. Okay, now what does that mean? What do I want to do about that? I could stay there, or I can, get in touch with where my desire is, where my joy is, where I feel energy and called towards. But we can only get there, unfortunately, by the pain of this is not feeling good. This is not working. I'm having a crisis. I need to leave my job. I need to quit this industry. I might need to move countries. I'm like there's usually people get to a certain point where they're just like the misalignment is too big for me to tolerate right now, or I have to leave a relationship who, a lot of people are in partnerships where maybe they've come to a place of awakening and the partner or family member isn't there,
Right.
like that's very real and that happens a lot too. So, I'm just normalizing the experience of, oh, this isn't working. Okay, then what do I need to do differently? And what will support me? Because
Yeah.
it's really important people recognize we need support.
Exactly. Let's talk about the support, because I
Mm.
remember when I first went through my breakdown, I didn't
Mhm.
feel like there was people who understood what I was trying to do and what I was even talking about. They're like, what's wrong with marketing? Marketing is fine. This is just how business works. Business is
Mhm.
business. And I'm like,
Mhm.
well, it doesn't have to be, but I didn't feel like anybody understood, right? And,
Yeah.
and so that makes you feel very lonely and wrong. You're constantly questioning yourself.
Yeah.
And so
Mhm.
then slowly I started to change my people. I'm like, okay, well, this is not supporting me. So
Yeah.
in that workshop that I just followed with you, it was a
Mhm.
small group of women in
Yeah.
change. And you, at the very beginning, you said, this is what matters. Small groups like this is what matters, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
what is the role of community in this transformation?
Well, this is something I feel very strongly about, and I am starting to write and focus on more and more. In fact, it might end up being my primary focus, which is the role of convening and curation.
Hmm.
So just to zoom back, I have a project called Project Inside Out,
Yeah.
which was started by a grant from the KR Foundation. And I was asked to put together some online tools and resources that take a lot of my work and kind of bring it together into some tools that anyone can access and use. And so, in doing that, I kind of formulated this idea that what we need to be doing is guiding and not driving change. And so, it's an attempt to do an intervention.
Hmm.
And um, and so we came up with these guiding principles of guiding, and a primary role of that is to be a convener. And so the organizations, the clients I work with, and more generally, in my kind of work in the world, I'm basically telling people that if you are an organization, if you have a business, if you have an enterprise, it's your role now to be more of a convener and bring people together and to take that responsibility very seriously. And that means as a curator, you have to be also attentive to your own what we were just talking about, like your own development, your own integrity, because when you're a convener, it's a responsibility. But my point is that it's in the context of relationship and usually small groups that a lot of transformation can happen.
Mhm.
And so, and I didn't just sort of come up with this. This is like incredibly well established. There's a book called Pro-Social that talks about the research, like in a very specific way. Like if you have this number of people, I think it's 8 to 12 people, and you bring people together over a duration, like, we already kind of know this. And I was doing this work in 2001, an experiment using online dialogue where we put people into small groups online and kind of had them together over time, no facilitation, but we had a certain methodology where people, introduced themselves, and, but that context was specifically about charged hot button issues, social issues, and it worked. Like amazingly, people did not devolve into fighting because we created these conditions that enabled people to really listen to each other and feel heard and learn and kind of have that exchange. So we already know a lot about what works. So what I'm suggesting is we go back and look at what actually works to support people through transformation that human societies have been doing since the beginning. So again, I'm not suggesting this is anything new. I'm saying that human wisdom practices, and, if you look at the council and indigenous cultures, and you look at circles, and you look at, like, humans have had this practice of coming together in hard times, ideally, not
Right.
always. It depends how functional and healthy the society is to say, hey, we need to look at what's going on. And then, like, people just naturally need to get together to kind of make sense, debate, argue, have that kind of exchange that can support a different way or perspective, but you're also getting a lot of support. So,
Yeah, it's so interesting.
yeah.
If I may just make the parallel again to the business and marketing world, right? In
Mhm.
business and marketing, everything we ever hear is go big, go
Mhm.
scale, or go
Yeah.
home. And, you need to be an influencer, and then
Mhm.
numbers is what matters most.
Mhm.
And so here you are saying, well, actually, no, not necessarily. Go back, small is beautiful, more
Mhm.
intimate, the deeper the connection.
Yeah.
And
But
so
that
I
is
really feel
scalable. But
it, and
that's
it
the thing.
is scalable at the same time, right? Yeah.
Yeah, like, I mean, people ask me, well, how do you scale this? It sounds very long and slow and relational. Well, have you heard of the 12-step movement? I
Yeah.
kind of think that's very successful.
Yes.
And it's very, talk about scale.
Yeah.
It's completely global.
Yeah.
And the methodology is literally holding space for people to come together
Yeah.
and primarily just tell their stories with each other. And then,
Mm.
you've got all the spiritual principles. It's very regimented, it's very structured. But I'm just saying, I'm not saying we all need to have 12-step groups. I'm saying that small group interactions are scalable if you're a skillful convener.
Right.
And so any company I'm working with, they're going to know I'm going to recommend this. It's not a surprise. It's sort of like, if you bring someone in and someone has their thing, it's like, okay, we know pretty much what's going to be
Renee
recommended.
is gonna say that.
I'm
Yeah.
going to say you need to approach your work in an organization by leveraging the people within it to hold and facilitate small groups.
Yeah. I love that.
Train people and support people to learn the skills of convening small groups.
Yeah.
That to me is the number one skill right now that we are
Yeah.
needing, and that often people don't have.
Hmm.
And, if anyone listening is a facilitator, how hard it is,
Yeah.
and how like it really is a very, nuanced kind of thing to learn. And I believe we can learn it, but in order to be a facilitator, it goes right back to how do we cultivate the capacity, to really be present, because the ability to hold space and be a facilitator requires that
Yeah.
you have to get out of you have to step back. You can't dominate. We've all been in settings where people are like dominating, they're talking too much. So, that's where I go with this, is how do we create the conditions for more
Yeah.
people to connect with each other in more intimate ways, but also look at how we can scale that.
Right. I love that. Yeah. I did a year-long program called Holding Space, and it
Hmm.
really came from that idea of, well, how do you hold space for yourself? So that was the
Yeah.
first module of, can't remember, 4 months or something. And then how do you
Mm.
hold space for others? And especially there was also a module, how do you hold space for grief, right? So
Right.
yeah. And so do you feel like we kind of met through the inner development goals?
Mhm.
Do you feel those inner development goals skills help with this idea of holding space for others?
Oh, definitely.
Mm,
Yeah. I mean, the IDG is it's a very simple, elegant framework that I see as a reminder of what we need to be doing.
right.
Uh, being, thinking, relating, acting, and collaborating. So, all of those are interrelated, because in order to be a skillful collaborator, you need to have being. In order to be a skillful thinker, you know what I mean? They all kind of relate to one another.
Mm,
But to me, the power of the IDG is mainly as a invocation to say, hey, we need to look at our skills as human beings, like how we, from a developmental perspective. And
mm,
how you do that, it doesn't matter to me. Like there can be a community literally in Nigeria, which I do know of, and they're doing all kinds of unbelievable work that's strengthening people's capacity to show up, hold space, but they don't need to call it IDG. It's like it's basically human wisdom and human practice.
yeah,
So,
it really is. There's one more topic I'd like to address, and it's this idea of caring.
mhm,
In humane marketing, I say humane marketing is for the generation that cares for ourselves, our
I love
clients, and the
that.
planet. So, what does caring look like for you? Because you seem to have a bit of a nuanced way to
Mhm.
caring, and it obviously relates to, say, sustainability as well. So, talk to us
Mhm.
about caring.
That's a great question. And it is the topic of the book I'm working on right now, which is literally called A Field Guide for People Who Care.
I love that.
So, basically, the way I approach care is um, that our care is a very fragile, it's very fragile and sensitive, and sort of, that each one of us as human beings have profound capacity to care about whatever, about life, about other people, about ourselves, about, animals or plants, or, like the expression of care. I think we need to um kind of unleash our limits on what care is, what isn't, what it looks like. And the reason why is because I spent 30 years in the environmental sustainability and climate sector, hearing people around me constantly saying, oh, well, people don't care.
Hmm.
Because if they cared, they would do something about it.
Hmm.
And I absolutely disagreed, but
Mm,
I didn't know why. And so that's why I ended up spending all this time doing research and, interviewing people and all this stuff, because I suspected that wasn't accurate.
mm,
And what I found through talking with lots of people around the world is, obviously people care very deeply. And I don't care what your condition is. I mean, seriously, I don't care if you are living on the street and you are preoccupied with your own basic survival. As a human being, you care about being alive. You care about, often, others and animals, and like, so there is this fundamental care that's there, that is expressed. Some people care deeply about ocean reefs, some people care deeply about a microbe, some people care deeply about knitting. I'm just like, whatever. But my point is that if we feel like, there's something that's interfering with our ability to express that care, we will retract it. We will pull it back in, and it will kind of go underground, or it will get it'll get applied in other ways. Like people I would interview in the Midwest United States would tell me all the environmental issues they cared very deeply about. And then they would say, but there's not a whole lot I can do about it. So I'm going to focus instead on my garden and my family and what I eat, because those things I have control over.
Right.
Now, does that mean that that person doesn't care about the water in the region? And so that's where I'm saying we've got to shift our myths about care, that somehow if you care, you're going to do something about it. The question is, how do we unlock and kind of access people's care by affirming, yes, of course we see you and we know that you care very deeply. Now let's figure out how we can help you express that. That as a marketing strategy is the goal. That's it. That is the marketing strategy, is literally communicate with people as if they already care. Like, that's it. There's my book. There's your campaign. Just go for it.
Yes. I love that. Yeah. It's not assuming nobody cares, but on the opposite, it's assuming they care. And I guess also what you said is like, well, figuring out what they deeply care about, because when I talk about the SDGs in programs or things like that, I always say, well, obviously, yes, they're all important topics, right? We can all agree to that, but not everybody, not each person cares about the same things very deeply. And so, there is this difference also about what we care about more than others. And so, figuring that out and talking to those ones.
The movement has got to get more sophisticated and nuanced.
Right. Yeah.
As soon as possible, because it's very simplistic right now.
Yeah.
And I will just say, especially those working in marketing and brand strategy, no offense, but there's just a pervasive way of thinking and working that's no longer appropriate for the time we're in now, which is that we've got to be more nuanced and much more attuned and much more relational to what people care about, why and how, and just like go right there, which is, again, bringing in that, like you just said, like, here's a menu of all the things going on in the world. It might be very overwhelming, but what do you feel most called to?
Right.
Okay, well, if you feel called towards animals and their animal welfare, then great. It doesn't mean you don't care about everything else, but it's like, let's honor where the energy is.
Yeah, it's human to want to relate on that human level and not be robots that like everything, right? That care about everything.
Right.
So yeah, I can totally relate to that. You also on your website talk about these the 3 A's, which I believe are anxiety, ambivalence, and aspiration. Is it right? So really finding out what drives people in their care.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff. It's very useful for people who do work in, marketing and brand strategy.
Yeah. I can't wait for that book. So keep working.
Thank you.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, any last words for people? I always say at the end of each episode, I say, listeners, humane marketers are change makers before we are marketers. So any last words that you would like to share with the change makers that are listening?
Well, one, check out Project Inside Out and my website. So there's reneelertzman.com, and then there's Project Inside Out has like tools, and it's a little dated right now. So I just want to acknowledge that. But I would check it out. And if you like it and are excited by it, get in touch. We're actually looking at how to evolve it into a program, like an actual like you said, you did a year-long program. I would like to evolve it into a year-long program for guiding change. And my I guess, I would just say inviting people who identify as change makers to really identify as being guides. And what does it mean to be a guide? And really learning about guiding, that it's, what does that involve?
Yeah.
And it's a more powerful way of showing up, but it's also takes a lot of the pressure off you, because it's no longer all on you to try to get people to do anything. It's really about how do we enable, guide, partner, kind of help contribute to the conditions for people to go there. And then the other thing I would just say is acknowledge that this work can be overwhelming and tiring and sometimes lonely. And it's really important that you get the support and connection that you need with nature, other people, whatever that is really important.
Yeah. Thanks so much. I always have one last question, and that is, what are you grateful for today or this week, Renée?
I'm grateful that I have, the ability to, live in a place that is safe and there's nature. And yeah, I'm just grateful for really simple things right now.
Yeah. Thanks so much for being here and being my guest. This was
Thank
delightful.
you. Yeah, I'm grateful for you and for having this conversation.
Thank you. Thanks so much for watching and being part of a generation of marketers who cares for yourself, for your clients, and for the planet. We really are change makers before we are marketers. So go ahead, be the change you want to see in the world. And I hope to see you again next week. Take care.